And that gets back to just clarifying that whole thing of course we own the land in their sense of it, in that it belonged collectively and we belonged collectively to this land.
Yes.
And that's why there was the notion just was insane, that you could own, an individual could own land. Actually, if you think about it even today, it is an insane idea that one man can own a chunk of land and own all the oil underneath the land and become a multi-millionaire on what? And then of course forget about how they got our land and how they got this false deed to the land, blah blah, all the rest of it. So there's a lot of insanity that we accept, and that's one of them, the fact that they can still own our land. But in reality, our land is our land, but we don't speak in that way.
Well,
because we're afraid to offend.
Right. Well, no, not me. But
no, I'm talking about us collectively again,
right,
as a people.
But another fallacy, it's like the ownership of animals. Animals cannot be owned. You know, I have a Jack Russell Terrier in the back room. I don't own that Jack Russell. I'm its caretaker. And that's how we have to remember these things. We are the caretakers of Mother Earth. We do not own Mother Earth. We are the caretakers of Mother Earth. We're not doing a very good job collectively, you know, but that's how it works. You know, and that's why I'm against zoos that cage up animals that should not be caged. I'm against circuses. I'm against rodeos where they abuse animals, because animals should not be owned. In native tradition, you know, if a native man says he owns an animal, then to me he's not following tradition. We don't own things like that. If you cannot own an animal, you cannot own the land.
But that's some of the trickery of the language, like we were talking about, like this ownership and so much with the dog. I was feeling comfortable with it. That whole thing about I own the dog. You know.
No, actually, if you knew my dog, the dog owns me.
We're in the same situation.
That dog has never brought me a bit of food. He's never worked a day in his life for me. That dog, I do everything for that dog. If anybody, I'm owned by that dog.
Yeah, well, we're in the same situation.
Right.
So we another point of agreement. We did that last show that you got a lot of feedback about our discussions when it got down to rituals and ceremonies. A lot of this, I think that the conflict is behind it is about education. We should be educated by Hollywood movies about who we are. I remember I was on the phone like 20 years ago. I've never forgotten. I'm talking to some guy over the phone, and he says, "Oh, no, I had just been on a radio show," and he said, "Oh, I heard you on the show," and blah 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 blah. I said, "Where are you calling from?" He said, "Oh, from East LA." I said, "Well, then how come you talk like this to me?" You know. So he was talking like what he expects an Indian should be talking. And then after I pointed it out to him, he still continued to talk in that way. And I'm going, and I told him, I said, you know, this is kind of like bothersome. Are you actually some white guy doing this? He said, no. And then all of a sudden, he dropped the voice. So I think part of the thing is there's a lot of play acting that goes on with our own people.
Absolutely.
And I think they'd rather play act than read some books. It doesn't mean you have to believe everything in the book.
No.
You study some, and you after a while you figure out, you know, what's good and what's bad, and what's maybe a little confused. And
today we're sitting in a really beautiful position, because with all the computers, these are tools that can be used to advance our knowledge. And I tell people all the time, if you don't want to know something, it's because you don't want to know it. It's because it's all out there for you to, you know, we are inundated with more information than ever before. It's our job to use that information for, you know, at my age, people say, oh, you know a lot. I say, I don't know everything. I'm still learning every day. And a lot of people quit learning. And this is what, you know, as Native people, we are taught, you never quit learning, never. And I'm learning every day. You know, so there's something, and as Native people we're taught, nothing is written in stone, that if you learn something and it's incorrect, you can change it. Whereas sometimes non-Native people will stick to false things because they're afraid to admit that they were wrong. If we're going to teach history, again, we should teach the correct history. You know, and this is where we get into these conflicts, because if 25 people say one thing and one person says another, it's human nature to follow the one person instead of the 25 that think they know what to do. And I don't do it that way. I do it the opposite way. If 25 people say something, I'm going to believe the 25 before I'm going to believe the silly one that says the totally opposite way to go. And this is what we need to do as individuals, you know. Okay. People ask me, you know, what are you? Because I have a lot of problems with people, you know, trying to figure out what I am. And I said, very simple. I am a citizen of Turtle Island, number one. But secondly and foremost is that I am Yoem tribe, and that is my tribe, that is my people, that's who I am. I'm not a Indian, I'm not an American Indian, I'm not a Native American. I don't even like the word America. One thing I'm sure we're not in dispute is that America is named after an Italian map maker who never set foot in North America. He never set foot on North America. He named it after himself, which is a common practice of Europeans. Their arrogance is so great that they will name something after themselves that they don't even have anything to do with. Even if that has a name already, which it did, they will still name it after themselves.
We use the word Nicanflaca, again from the Nahuatl language, which is in the north part of the continent. That was the last big civilization, the last huge population. And we use Anahuac for the top part, and the whole is Semanahuac, the complete world. But then you could say the same things in whatever other of our languages. And kind of the only thing that does bother me about Turtle Island, why are we using the English language? Again, we can come up with different languages. Because every tribe that I've seen has a legend of what Turtle Island is, but they have it in their own language. And because there's approximately over 250 languages, it's impossible to learn. Okay, I travel a lot. So I can say wado, mado, osio. I can say different words in a lot of different languages, and I do that out of respect for the tribes I'm at and where I'm at. But there is a common language, and even though it is the language of the Euro invader, it's a tool, and I'm going to use that tool. So instead of trying to expect everybody to learn, when I greet all the people here, I can say Lios Ichanyalu in my language. That is hello, how are you? But I don't do that because they would not understand me. So I use the common language. I don't expect, out of respect, I don't expect people to know my language. But yet, when I go to powwows, I have people come to me and say, "Aho, what are you talking about? I don't speak your language. That's Lakota." Or "Osio, I'm not Cherokee. What are you doing? Ani Yanuia," which is the correct name for the Cherokee people. I said, "Speak to me in my language if you want to speak to me in an Indian language." But like you said, it's play acting, because they come to you and they come with all this weirdness. They go through all these lines, and what I like to do is I like to answer back. You know, they talk to me in a language I'm not familiar with. I say, "Dite kui bahila," and they look at me like, "What did you say?" I said, "Hello." I said, "How much does that cost?" You know, it means nothing. I said, this is silly. Out of respect, don't come up to me and start jabbering in Indian. You know, learn who I am first, and then speak to me in my own language if you want to do that. Or speak to me in English, which we can use as a tool to communicate. And that's basically what your answer is. That's why we're forced to use Turtle Island, because that's something that's the language that we all know.
Right, and it's different in every language. Yeah. Every language, you know, of the 250 languages we have, it's going to be different.
Yeah, or it's kind of like the other experience I've had, people who are Nahuatl speakers or Zapotec speakers or Mayan speakers, or kind of the major languages in the millions. And again, like one specific recollection I have was the Zapotec saying, "Yeah, sure, we're speaking the language and we're still living in the big towns that we had and all that, but we're saying the same stupid things everybody else was saying in Spanish or English. Just as ignorant. We don't have any secret religion. We've been pretty much destroyed. And the only thing, a lot of our people, they're even ashamed to speak our own language, you know, in front of other people. But I think part of the thing is not so much about learning the language, but to learning the history of our own people, our accomplishments.
While we're busy occupying, why don't we unoccupy Turtle Island? You see, and that way, and unoccupy, you know. a gentleman that I admire, Ted Means, said one thing that's very interesting. Before you can free the land, you have to free your mind. See, and that's very important. These things, these things stay in my head because they're so true, and no matter what you say, they're true. And he's right. Before we can decolonize the land, we must decolonize our brains. And a lot of us are colonized and assimilated, and that's where the problem is. And when we break away from that and go back to our traditions as Native people of what's really important, that's when we will start making progress towards the final, what we really need to do. If you look at the languages of the tribes in the Yurok, the Pomo, the Miwok, the Cahuilla, the Chumash, very few of those tribes had word for war. They didn't understand war. They did not understand murder. They didn't understand a lot of things, and we have to look at those languages to give us the clue of how these people actually lived. So why was it so easy to come into California and take over these people? Because they had no warrior society, because they did not understand. Yes, there were strong warrior societies in other tribes, but out of 1,000 tribes that once existed, very few had warrior societies, because this is, again, manufactured history, where manufactured history teaches that our people fought against each other constantly. That's not true. That's totally not true. A tribe did not want to risk its resource of human life by fighting against each other. So there was always trying to mediate problems. And you can see that in history over and over and over again. If you study true history, if you study the white man's history, which says, oh my God, the Lakota were fighting this tribe and this tribe and this tribe and this tribe. That wasn't what was happening. Sure, there was warrior tribes.
But not a constant.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, you see?
Okay.
The lie...
Now we're fine-tuning the idea.
The lie is this. If you saw the movie Apocalypto, which is
you had to go there.
All right, because when someone asked me what I thought of Apocalypto, I said I thought from the beginning it was the wrong title. It should have been called A Bunch of Crapto, because it was a bunch of crap from the beginning to the end. And the worst part of it was the imagination somebody had to say that the salvation of these people was the Spanish ships in the harbor. And that's what the whole movie was like, pointing this out, this manufactured history that the salvation for the Maya, for the Mexica, for all the tribes that were here in that part of North America was the Spanish. And that is such a horrible insult to Native people.
But at the end, some of our own people were applauding their rival.
That's what I'm saying. That's the salvation. And I said, that's ridiculous. You see? So for that movie, from beginning to end, from the costuming, because I work in movies and they do costuming, from the costuming to the props to everything was just one big lie after another. And I was told that Mel Gibson...
Everyone had tattoos and piercings, I think, without exception, right?
Well, I'll give you an example. Yeah. This is a good example. Okay, there's a tribe that everybody refers to as Nez Perce. Okay, if you speak French, you know Nez Perce means pierced nose. Because some guy in the tribe went out and got his nose pierced. They called the whole entire tribe pierced nose, which their real name is Nimipu. Nimipu means the people in their language. And so what happens is that because this one guy, if I go to the mall and I see a white guy with piercings and things happening all over, what do I call him? Metal face? And now the whole people is called metal face because
all
of this one guy?
Or metal face.
Well, another example is that we cannot make a generalization into something that fits all people, because that's not the way it works. I'll give you an example. In the Southwest, we have tribes that were living in the pueblos, and again, I'm going to use the English or the Spanish word because it's easier. But these people...
Now we know what you're referring to.
Right. Because these people, went through bad times, and the temperature changed, the land changed, the water changed, the rainfall changed. So they left these cities. They left these cities and abandoned them because they collapsed on their own. See, not because of some space alien that came and took them all away, and some of the stories I've heard are ridiculous, but because if you're living in the neighborhood and the Ralph's closes down, then you go to a different grocery store. It's that simple. And that's exactly what these people did. They moved somewhere else where there is food and water, and they could sustain themselves. But when they were going through these pueblos, they found an incidents where there was bones, human bones that had been carved, looked like they had been butchered. And so from that little thing right there, we assume not me, because I know better, that these tribes were cannibals. They were practicing cannibalism. That's ridiculous, because if you know modern history, there's a gentleman named Jeffrey Dahmer who ate people. So by going by that generalization, we can say all white people are cannibals because of Jeffrey Dahmer. This is ridiculous. You cannot do that, see? So you have to know what the culture is, what the traditions of those people are, and then you can decide what is what. But to try to make generalizations, and that again is manufactured history, because if you're dealing with cannibals, then what you do to them is okay. Chumash had no metal. They had no metal whatsoever, and yet the civilization that they were able to forge out of nothing with stone tools was incredible. You know, these were highly advanced people, highly intelligent people, and this is what we forget. Okay, that a civilization only advances as far as it has to. Once it reaches where it's really nice and solid, that's where it stays. And if you advance further, it's because you needed to advance further. You know,
yeah.
But to say that these people did not advance any further because of limited mental capacity is again another manufactured lie to try to justify genocide and abuse of native
That's
people.
why I use the example of saying the Yoeme who live in a very arid area, again, just as intelligent in terms of what their knowledge was of, say, of the desert. Meanwhile, somebody who's living in Tenochtitlan, a city of 100,000 to 300,000 people, and that person has knowledge from books and knowledge from blah, blah, blah. Now you switch them across, you put that guy from the city, he's going to have a problem surviving in the desert, and you get the guy from the desert, put him in the city, he's going to have a problem. Not being able to read the books, the other guy's not going to be able to read the desert since he wasn't living in the desert area. You get the same intelligence. It's a matter of are people adjusting to either living tribal or living in big cities. But again, we're the same people, the same human beings, related, and we made adjustments to the geography. You were talking about the so-called mysteries of what happened to people. Just this whole Katrina. New Orleans, if there was no federal aid or what, that city would have been abandoned a long time ago. In the old days. European days.
I'll go even further than that. That city would have never been built.
Yeah.
Because our people are smart enough not to build in places where you're not supposed to build. The city of Palm Springs is a prime example. Where the natives live is where the water is. Where the white people live is where the desert is. This is ridiculous. And they bring the water in.
Yeah. Although today we're using the technology to figure out how to get ourselves
absolutely
out of the condition that we're in, which is not it is exactly the worst condition our people have ever lived. I guess since we've been living as a people on this continent.
But these are tools, and that's all they are.
Yeah.
And the thing to me that's funny is that somebody will say, you have to be traditional, you have to be do things in the old ways. And I say, why? I said, for example, I'll give you an example. It was something funny that happened here. We were building the houses of the Chumash, and because willow poles was used traditionally, where if you build a willow op, that's what the houses of the Chumash are called, a willow op lasts you maybe 2 to 3 years. And the old tradition was that you knocked it down and you rebuilt another one. They only took a couple of days to build if you knew what you were doing. So today, we don't do that with the willow poles anymore because we know they're going to fall apart and rot, so we build them out of rebar. And I was a little embarrassed of using the rebar at the beginning because I said, wow, that's not a traditional material, but I don't want to rebuild these things every couple of years because they're very hard to, today we have to rebuild them, and to just gather the reeds and all that's a lot of work. And so I used rebar and then covered them with a tule or the bulrush. And in the middle of the process of building one of the Chumash elders came here to visit. And I was a little embarrassed because I didn't want him to see the rebar. But he went into the house and he saw the rebar. He didn't say a word. And I said, before you say anything, I want to explain the rebar. He says, you don't have to explain to me. If our people would have had rebar back then, we'd have used it.
Yeah.
And there's sayings in our culture, and I always refer to these sayings. Even bad people can do good things.
Yeah. But the only problem I've heard, kind of like a distortion of what you're saying, is that the Europeans came here and they killed our people and they enslaved us and all that. but they brought us Christianity, and now because of that Christianity, I've been born again, and it is worth it that all those millions of my people were killed because I have been able to be born again. That kind of, which is, you see where it's a distortion of.
That's selfish and egotistical.
Yeah.
To think that the Creator only worries about you and doesn't worry about the millions that were killed to achieve what you got. That's totally arrogant, egotistical, and totally wrong. See, and we can't fall into that. If we start falling into that, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah. So overall, I guess we're touching on kind of some of the areas where there is a confusion, and we need more than just two people talking like this.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's difficult. What we just mentioned, Michael Cole. I've had several great conversations with this man, and a lot of times I end up feeling more comfortable in the conversations with him than with some of my own people, and that makes me feel uncomfortable. Nothing to say bad about.
One of the things you brought up, that we have to remember is when I saw Apocalypto, one of the things I hated was even in the advertisements, to show a Mexica calendar and pretend it was an Aztec. I mean a Mayan calendar.
Yeah.
If you look at the Mayan calendar, which is very, very complex, not that the Mexica calendar is not, but the Mayan calendar is so complex. It's a circle within a circle. And it has to match up in certain parts, and it's got all these great intricacies. You were talking about a computer. That's about as good a computer, and that was a very accurate thing that could tell time.
More accurate than
what we have today.
Which was tied into the lunar, to the Venus, and
these, this again shows you an intelligent civilization and intelligent people who, if you look at the amount of area that the pyramid in the Great Pyramid in Mexico takes up, it's actually larger than the pyramid in Egypt. But yet we make a big fuss over that one, and we totally ignore this one, and that annoys me because these are where I'm not a city dweller, and big cities for Native people, I'm not sure if that's a great idea or not because they always seem to collapse on each other, but they were still outstanding achievements of technology. These buildings, you see them in the Mississippi Valley, you see them in Mexico, you see them in the Yucatan, you see these incredible structures that people today could not build, not even think about building. And these are the things, these are not the works of savages, these are the works of very highly intelligent, advanced people. And this is what we, again, it annoys me. What happened to the pyramids in the Mississippi Valley? Most of them were bulldozed because they don't mean anything. Yet the Egyptian pyramids, which are much younger, we have to honor those as some kind of shrine to man's technology.
Yeah, but at the same time, in Supecadal, in what is called Peru, those pyramids down there are older than the ones in Egypt. They've already been carbon 14 dating. And but getting back to, I think the thing is where we don't appreciate. I took a trip in 2007 to about 25 different sacred sites, and one of the things when I got to the Mayan areas, I realized that in talking with some of the Mayans, they didn't. Here you are in Uxmal. I remember Uxmal. Sure, the Mayan guy that was there, I talked with him a little bit, but you could tell he didn't relate to his own heritage. For him, it was just a job. If he could do a better job, and that's kind of my concern. Where we don't take it to, it's all just about the knowledge, just about spirituality. Somewhere in there's got to be an education to bring honor back to our people. There's got to be education that we think about that there's only one way to live our lives, and that is as a free people, as a liberated people. But to get to have people even have that discussion or that thought, it's a very difficult thing.
Because they say, Dad, we are so happy to be here and so proud to be here. We're also saddened because today it's not like it was. So today, the people there, the Mayans, have no understanding of their own culture, their own tradition. They're actually setting up booths in the pyramids themselves, selling the worst crap you can possibly see. And I said, girls, as much as that hurts me, I understand it. These people are trying to survive. They have been beaten down, and they said, Dad, now we understand. Thank you for telling us this. But see, we have to, you have to get to that point where
we're fair to ourselves.
Right. A lot of times We tend to be overly critical of our own people. We do not try to understand 500 years of oppression, of post-traumatic stress syndrome. We don't take these things into account. So a lot of times we get angry at our own people for selling out. I don't. I don't like it. I've said this before. I said there are things that I do not like, but I don't hate anybody who does them, because I try to understand why they do them. And not everything is black and white. You know, we have to make these understandings of our own people. Yes, I hate assimilation. Yes, I hate sellouts. Yet, but I try to understand it. You know, I don't hate the people that are doing it, because I'm trying to understand it. Because we have gone through so much that, again, not to excuse it, because you can't excuse it, but you have to try to understand it.
It's a lot of psychological damage that's been
Yes.
done to us.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're not saying let's be silent, don't say anything about
absolutely
it.
not.
We do have to. Again,
No.
they're just another you or me who hasn't been awoken, or who has been drunk deeper from the poison.
One of the things I keep saying over and over and over again, people ask me why I am so outspoken and why I speak out and not, I don't sit down and be quiet. It's very simple, because I was taught from an early age that if you do not speak out against bad behavior, I'm going to be mild, and abuse and injustice and inequality, you're just as guilty as the people who are committing that injustice and inequality if you do not speak out. And I will not do that. I have to speak out, and that's why I align myself with people who also speak out and are not afraid to stand up for what is right. And when you stand up, you will be attacked, as this young man knows, but you know that from the beginning. And if you don't want to, I just wrote this on my Facebook, the best way to not be criticized is to do nothing and to say nothing. You know,
But by doing
but then
that,
you accomplish nothing.
and not only that, but you're also giving them permission to do more.
Absolutely. People will only do to you what you allow them to do to you. And we have to learn that. We have to learn that we control our own lives, you know. So if we want to be the victim, we can be the victim. If we want to stand up and speak out against what's going on, then we're no longer the victim. And that's what we need to do. That's how our people used to be. That's what I keep saying. The best salvation for Native people is to go back to our culture, our tradition, things that made us what we were at one time, and not the silliness that we have today, and not believe in manufactured history and these lies that have been fed to us to justify abuse of Native people.
And that's kind of the intention with the videos and different things. We're trying to help our people, help to heal themselves from the psychological damage that's been done to us, so we can help each other, and hopefully in the coming generations we can improve, and then the generations upon that. And with a lot of work, there is a possibility that we can be a liberated people in some future. And those of us who are participating in this, and the people who are watching this, hopefully that they'll share the information. Thank you again.
Well, thank you.